Hey friends, welcome back to HeartScapes Urban Homestead, where we're growing gardens and communities to live lives that are rooted, spacious, connected, and that help us remember ourselves. My name's Michaela. Welcome back to the garden. Well, spring has absolutely sprung here in Central California. And friends, let's go take a look at the garden and see what she is asking of us today and what she has to offer us back in return. One of the things that is so miraculous and exhausting about the garden is that it really doesn't sleep, at least not here in California. As soon as one crop is done with its cycle, the next one is ready to go in. Our zucchini are just starting to put on fruit. The good mother Stallard beans are well on their way to completely covering this trellis. And I can tell that the potatoes are getting ready to complete their cycle because the plants are just starting to put on the tiniest blossoms. Pretty soon the potatoes will be ready to come out and some melons will be going in their place. Over in the onion patch, the onions were harvested last week and they're drying, and they've been replaced with these tiny peppers. And the tomatoes that were being smothered by all the onions finally getting the space and the light that they need. Over in the fennel patch, the fennel is just about done with its cycle and we'll have the next crop ready to go. And over in the garlic patch, these beautiful plants that have been growing all winter are finally ready to harvest. And that is our garden task for today. The cyclical nature of the garden brings both a dynamic excitement in the inevitable changes from year to year, and also a soothing predictability that comes from seasonal patterns. It helps to remind me that I'm an animal of this world and that I can rest into those seasonal cycles, that predictability, and the dynamics of working with the earth on a changing cycle. And as I rest into these tasks that I have done again and again, year after year, it helps my mind to relax and to wander back into the past, thinking about the stories of those previous gardens and those past engagements with these amazing plants. And as I work the garlic patch today, there's this phrase that keeps running in my mind. A phrase often said by another gardening YouTuber, Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, a delightful channel, an Australian gardener who shares his exploits on YouTube. I'll put his link down below. And Mark often says, you don't have to be self-sufficient in everything. Just try to be self-sufficient in something. And this is a sentiment that helps me out a lot because I can sometimes jump to a bit of an all or nothing thinking when it comes to the garden, that I want to grow as much food as possible. All of my food needs to come from the garden, which is not even remotely possible given my circumstances as an urban gardener. But also it's really kind of missing the point. Being 100% food self-sufficient is not really the point of my gardening adventure. The point is what I said earlier, to remember that I am an animal of this earth and that I am meant to be in relationship and collaboration with it. That mindset, that value system helps to keep me steady in the midst of the unpredictability of the cycles of nature. And it also helps me to, stay spacious when things don't necessarily go the way that I planned. But as gardeners, we can choose to be self-sufficient in something. And it was garlic for me. That was the first thing that I was ever able to produce an entire year's supply out of my tiny garden 20-something years ago when I was gardening in an apartment building, just a tiny speck of land. Somehow, in that tiny speck, I managed to grow enough garlic one year to cover the entire year's supply, and then some. I had enough to save for seed garlic for the next year. And for several years after, I was self-sufficient in garlic, including having the seeds that I needed for the following year. When I moved to Davis and had to adjust to a very different growing climate, I struggled quite a bit, and for some reason, garlic became a challenging crop for me. I gave up growing it altogether for a time and only started again in 2020, and slowly have been figuring out how to bring a decent crop of garlic into fruition here in Davis. This year's crop looks pretty good, even though for some reason the heads developed this very odd characteristic of the cloves seeming to be separated. I'm not quite sure what that's about. If any of you know, feel free to share down in the comments. But they seem to be okay that way, so we're gonna just go with it. But it feels good to be in a place where once again I have the capacity to grow a year's worth of garlic and be self-sufficient in that crop. It makes me appreciate, again, that cyclical nature that I've returned to the garden after a time away and once again finding some success, finding my way back into balanced, healthy, whole relationship with the garden and with all the amazing bounty that comes from it. So with this crop of garlic, I'm going to be braiding it into a giant braid to hang in the pantry for as long as it lasts. The garlic that we harvested today is going to be drying. This is a batch that I harvested last week, so it's now just about ready for braiding. Now, I am not going to claim to be an expert at braiding garlic, even though I've done it for years. My braids tend to be messy and disheveled and never quite even, but then again, so are heads of garlic, especially these. Look at how oddly shaped they are. But we're going to give it our best try. I've been using the same instructions for all of these years. That crumpled, torn piece of paper there in the frame of the video is some handwritten notes that I jotted down from an internet article. Gosh, probably with that very first batch of garlic 20-something years ago. I've had this same scrap of paper with sketchy notes that I use every year. Hey, if it works, it works. So, you start with your 3 heads, 3 nice big ones, and you tie them together, leaving a nice long tail on the cord, making sure they're tight and up. Making sure that you have a proper bolt of twine. Apparently this knitting yarn is just not going to do the job. There we go. Ball of twine. A little bit thicker than I like to use, but it'll get the job done. At least it won't break. So you tie that first bunch of heads of garlic together. Make them nice and tight as well as you can. I feel a little silly offering this as any form of tutorial. Again, despite the fact that I've done this for years, it's obviously still a little bit awkward for me. But again, if it works, it works. The ones you have your 3 large bottom bulbs tied together in a little triangle, you're going to start adding bulbs from the sides and the center as you braid. And this gets rather awkward as the bundle grows and grows. And luckily, the stems are still fairly pliant. You want to let the heads of garlic dry to the point where they're not, wet and juicy stems, because then they'll mold inside of the braid. But you also don't want to let them completely dry out, because then they'll be brittle and they'll just break. They won't be pliant enough to actually tie into a braid. I think I let these dry maybe even a little bit too long, but we'll do the best that we can. Generally speaking, I found that it works best to put smaller heads on the sides, on the outside edge, and put the larger heads in the center. That seems to give a good balance and have it all braid up in a decent balance with each other. And you just keep going, making sure that that long tail of your twine is staying inside the braid and braiding along with the garlic. And when you feel that you've gone as far as you want to go, you take the slack on that twine, wrap it around, just a boatload of times, tie it, and there you have it. A very messy, very lumpy garlic braid. And that is going to come out here to the pantry. We have the dregs of last year's braid. So many heads of garlic that have been used. We're down to the last ones. Most of these are all dried out, not really any good anymore, unfortunately. There's a couple that we'll reuse, bring them to the kitchen, and replace it with this year's harvest. And there it is, friends. Once again, I am self-sufficient in garlic. Thanks for joining me, friends. And until next time, may you be deeply provisioned for all that this glorious season is bringing you. Love you. Goodbye.